Welcome to Let's Draw Pokemon. Today we're going to be drawing Charmander's final form, Charizard. So as you know, Charizard's a fire-flying Pokemon. He kind of looks like a dragon, although he never really achieves dragon typing unless he Mega Evolves, of course. So, Charmander, Charmeleon, they shared a similar body structure. Charizard actually elongates out a bit and changes it up with a nice wingspan and fun stuff like that. So, starting off with his body, you want to draw a circular form. He has a very rounded belly and torso. And from his torso, he has a long cylindrical neck. If you think of things like a brontosaurus and things like that, it has that kind of vibe going on. And then just a simple oval head will do for now. We'll flesh it out more in a little bit. And so I've blocked in the legs. They have a similar structure to Charmander and Charmeleon. They're bigger, a little more muscular because it's Charizard, being the final epic looking form of our little fire guy. And of course his little tail has now become quite massive and thick. So when you're drawing the tail and thinking about that, you want to remember that it's a rounded shape. It's like a cone that has been stretched out and elongated with a nice large strong base. Charizard's arms are also kind of bony. They have that similar look to Charmeleon, how he has bone protrusions and nice musculature and stuff like that going on. So with Charizard, it's similar. His arms are a little smaller, kind of reminiscent of like a T-Rex arms or something. Just little things compared to his massive legs and tail. The rest of him's pretty beefy looking. And as for the wings, they're composed of fairly thin looking, I'm not sure what you would call that part of the wing, to be honest, but like the little horn-like things protruding out, and you have the wingspan branching out from there. The outer part of the wings is orange, with the inner portion being a nice blue tealish color. That looks quite nice. Whenever you're drawing in the wings, they have very unique forms and stuff like that, but you can see different shapes in it. Some of them are rounded, some are forming triangles and stuff like that. So just look for those shapes as you're sketching it out. And of course there's little detailing in the wings that adds a little bit to them. Makes it look like they can move and all that fun stuff. And of course he has his fire tail. And we've had quite a bit of practice drawing out the fire, so we're pretty good there. And of course he has similar claws to Charmeleon and Charmander on his feet and on his hands as well. But his hands are a little more, I guess, opposable, a little more human-like. Not quite enough fingers, but you get the idea. And of course they have little claws on them too. And as you're drawing the little nubby fingers, just think of them as little sausages. They're cylindrical in form, but they're opposable and they bend. So you can curl them around and think of them almost like a bird's claws. They're little feet that go and grab onto the branch or grab onto their prey. They're kind of similar in that regard. And so now all we have left really on this sketch is to do up the head. Charizard has, of course, like some triangular shaping around his eyes. He's angular, like Charmeleon was. And he has a nice long snout, which is why we drew an oval-like shape outward. He's not... The points, the angular points on him, like his nostrils and stuff like that, are quite rounded, so they have a smooth look to them. But they definitely gut out compared to someone like Charmander, who didn't really have those crazy nostrils going on. And then, of course, the singular horn on Charmeleon's head has now become 2 horns, one on each side of Charizard's head. So, he's a bit more complicated to draw than Charmander or Charmeleon, but as long as you keep in mind that Charizard, like all other creatures, is just composed of shapes and different 3D forms that you have to try and capture. And if you're... One thing I like to do a lot is like keep my base sketch really rough. It doesn't have to be neat and tidy. And then whenever you get closer to your inking phase, you might want to go and like erase out some of the lines, put a little more emphasis on other ones, just so whenever you go to ink, you're a little more clear on what you're inking. So that's what I did there. And now I'm toning down the sketch, fading it out so it makes it nice and easy for my inking phase, like we do every time. So we're focusing on having nice, clean, crisp lines, making certain aspects of it pointed so they have a sharp look to them. And another thing that I noticed that I missed in the sketch was adding in that little extra indentation around Charizard's eye. And then I added in a little bit more detail to fingers, little knuckles going on, stuff like that. If you notice that you want to add a little more detail or anything like that, feel free to do it. And you want to make your best effort to try and get that stuff in at the start, but we're all human. Sometimes we miss things, or we think that something might make for better details or stuff like that. And so I'm just using my pre-picked palette and filling everything in, like usual whenever we color. And so now we're going to be going into the shading. I'm coloring Charizard's tail like I did with Charmander and Charmeleon, so it has that nice fire glow to it instead of just the plain black. And now we're starting to shade the skin. Like his previous forms, Charizard's composed of a lot of rounded shapes. You want to put emphasis on that whenever you're shading, so you're drawing out the 3D form. And you want to be curving around the 3D forms when you can. So on stuff like the tail, it's a big cylinder / cone shape, so you're going horizontally around it and going in that kind of direction, filling everything out nicely, and then laying all your shadows down everywhere, making sure it's all nice and even. You don't want to go and over render an area before the rest of the image is complete. And I'm just fading it out a little bit, erasing some of the shadows lightly, blending them in a little better, making sure everything's not too dark, but just the right level of shadow on Charizard for the light that he's getting. So after going over it with the shadows, it looks like the forms are starting to pull out a bit more. It's a little more clear on the three-dimensional shapes. You tell that his legs are rounded and large. You're starting to be able to tell that the wings are kind of set back a bit and curved. It's these little details whenever you're coloring that really start blending to the overall form of your character. It gives them a level of realism that didn't otherwise exist in the flat sketch. So we're just focusing on our shadows. We're adding in some of the orange flame now, make that fire on his tail come to life, like we've done with the others. It's always kind of fun doing the flames because it's a form that's not set in stone, and sometimes just playing around with it a little bit or changing it up can make the fire really come alive and look really incredible. I'm just adding on some highlights to the nails, the eyes, all that fun stuff. And we're shading up his underbelly, which we'll have to blend in a little bit. So his form's really starting to pop out. You can tell he has a rounded stomach by shading on that one side, and then highlights are touching the other side. And now we're adding in some speculars and nice little highlights on his body, emphasizing where the light's hitting and really adding to his overall form. It gives a nice three-dimensional look to it. One thing I did with the wings was add in a little bit of speckling. It adds this nice texture to it. makes them look quite neat. It gives you almost a sense that maybe the wings are a little bit different in material compared to his skin. The skin's more smooth and maybe the wings are a little more rough. I'm just adding some highlights onto the skin now. Really putting emphasis on them. On the different forms, on the nostrils, the horns. Just helping them stand out. And speaking of standing out, we're adding some more edge work to the flames, adding in some highlights and then a little additional yellow to give it a little more form and figure to it. And I think we have our final finished Charizard here. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.